Some of the material contained in today's true crime podcast may be unsuitable for most listeners. Discretion is advised. Hello, sippers. I'm Demetrius.
I'm Renee.
And I'm Martia.
And this is Sipping on Wine, a true crime podcast. Let's get into it, ladies.
Let's go.
Woo woo.
Hey, y'all.
Hey, ladies. Hey, sippers.
We here for another episode.
I know. It's 2022, y'all.
Can you believe it?
Season 2. Oh, my goodness. I cannot believe it.
Wait until it's like 2030. We'll be like, oh, my gosh.
Oh, my God. We're going to still say it. Oh, my God.
With my cane and all.
Oh, you are not going to have a cane. Stop it.
I hope not.
You won't.
So what we got going on today?
Let's get into it. We're going to get into our drink, which is a repeated offender. If anybody follow us, and if you ever
one
heard
of the good ones.
This one is called Classic Old Fashioned, and it's a bourbon drink cocktail. So we'll post all the ingredients and list how to make it on our social media.
I want a little bit of hair on your chest.
It's so good, though.
With it?
Oh, not the hair on the chest.
A little bit of hair on your chest. It's a little strong.
You can't go wrong with the strong drinks, though, especially when you're doing a podcast like ours. Woo.
Ooh, yes. So sippers, if you're not sipping on anything with 13% or more, you know, it's okay to get your tea. It's okay to get your water.
Wink, wink. Wink, wink.
Not 5.
Not 5.
Got it. Call me out. It's okay.
It's okay, sippers. You can have your tea and your coffee. We got you. That's why it's called Sip and Unwind, but we prefer the wine part or more. All right, sippers. Whew, this true crime is going to be a little bit of a doozy. I know we say that all the time, but this is a oozy doozy.
I don't know if I'm ready for it, but girl,
yeah,
you've been prepping us.
Yeah, I've been trying to warn my ladies. I've been trying.
Okay,
so this true crime is about Lonnie David Franklin Jr. So before we start this one, I want everyone to know I didn't know anything about this case, this man, any of his victims or anything. I never heard of it, but I do remember hearing the name, the Grim Sleeper.
What's his name again?
Lonnie David Franklin Jr.
Okay.
I've heard of the Grim Sleeper, but I don't know the story behind it. So, my goodness, I got to brace myself for this one.
Yeah, so I was like, let me look into this case, and if it's anything that I want to proceed with, I'm going to make it an episode, and here we go. So everybody grab your drink and take plenty of notes because it gets kind of rough. Lonnie David Franklin Jr., also known as the Southside Slayer, but because of his 14-year break of his almost 30-year killing spree, he is also called the Grim Sleeper. This is a name that was created by LA Weekly reporter Christine Pelisek. She is also the reporter who broke the news of the secret 800 task force created to find the killer because she felt the public needed to know a killer was among them. Now, with that intro, let's dive into this week's true crime. Today's case will take us to the West Coast, the state where dreams are made of and stars are born, California. Lonnie David Franklin Jr. was born on August 30th, 1952, in South Central Los Angeles, California. There isn't much information about his childhood, but I learned Lonnie suffered from migraines and struggled academically in school. At 7 years old, Lonnie's father allowed him to drive, and this opened up his obsession and love for cars. Also, according to those close to him, Lonnie considered himself quite a ladies' man. He was known to be much of a charmer. At 16 years old, Lonnie had a run-in with the law on several occasions. He was taken in twice for grand theft auto and a year later for burglary. His father, Lonnie Franklin Sr., was not with his son's unruly behavior and the path he was heading on. So Lonnie Sr. made his son enlist into the Army. In 1974, at the age of 21, Lonnie was stationed in Germany, Stuttgart, Germany, and he worked as a cook. While there, on April 16, 1974, Lonnie Franklin Jr. and two of his Army buddies were out on the town and decided on this night to commit rape. They attempted to lure one young woman into their car, but it failed. Still out and about, they attempted again and managed to get a 17-year-old girl in the car by putting a knife to her neck. Lonnie, who was driving, takes them to a field where she is raped repeatedly. After she is assaulted by all three men, allegedly one of the three also took pictures of the victim. But the young victim does something that most wouldn't dare do. She persuades Lonnie to take her home and decides to give him her telephone number. He calls her the next day and the pair agree to meet. But ironically, when Lonnie arrives, he is greeted by the police. Lonnie is later convicted of kidnapping, attempted kidnapping, and rape. And he is sentenced to only 3 years and 4 months in prison. But Lonnie never served all of his time because he was shipped back to the United States and he was given dishonorable discharge in May of 1976 from the Army. But I also found sources that said he was released on July 24th, 1975. So those two dates kind of conflict. But however, now a civilian, Lonnie Franklin Jr. So let me go back and insert this real quick. Lonnie was married young, but that marriage failed. His first wife was a drug user, and she misused the money he gave her to pay bills and take care of household items and things around the home. She decided she didn't want to be with Lonnie anymore, and the two split. So Lonnie did marry again in the early 1980s to a woman named Sylvia, and they had two kids together, a girl and a boy, whose names are Crystal and Christopher Franklin. Lonnie Franklin was well liked and loved by those in his community. His name was also well known and respected on the streets. Anything someone needed, he was the go-to man, be it for money, cars, or whatever. He was the neighborhood guy everyone trusted. No one ever questioned Lonnie because they believed he was a good husband, father, and friend. He was also known as the neighborhood mechanic and more. As to what the more was, that part was never disclosed. And I tried to research the more part, but because for his love of cars, Lonnie Franklin would go on to work as a garage attendant slash mechanic doing maintenance work on police cars for the LAPD. For those who don't know, that stands for Los Angeles Police Department. He soon leaves that job, but continuing his work for the city, he manages to get a job with the sanitation department. This is how and where Franklin became familiar with the Los Angeles alleyways and other areas surrounding where he lived as a way of knowing how and where to discard bodies. So let that be a red flag. Everybody note that.
Good
He was a
Lord.
sanitation
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's pretty
worker.
easy then. Get
Okay.
away with that.
So in 1992, at the age of 40 years old, Franklin would quit his sanitation job and claim disability for an arm injury he acquired while on the job. In the 1980s, the crime rate was noted to be very high in Los Angeles, and there were reports of 800 or more murders that occurred a year. The city was also fueling with gangs and had a cocaine epidemic. Also, to top it off, there were several serial killers on the loose. But not only one during this time, the city was being attacked by several different serial killers, and all were killing in a very similar pattern. One of the famous cases known during this era is the Golden State Killer. There were multiple victims coming up dead in the alleyways of Los Angeles, and all were linked in some way to the same killer. On August 10th, 1985, this killer claimed his first victim. Her name was Deborah Jackson, age 29, a cocktail waitress. She had left a friend's house and went to take a bus to her apartment when she was approached by a man in a car who offered her a ride. Her body was found with 3 gunshot wounds to the chest and left in an alley. I later found out that she was a mother and her son did an interview. His name was Jermaine Jackson, and he just always had questions of why this person took his mother away from him. So that was kind of like a heartbreak interview to watch. So on August 12th, 1986, there was a second victim, Henrietta Wright, age 35, a mother of 5. She was shot twice in the chest and was found barefoot, wrapped in a blanket, and covered with a mattress. Police reported that her mouth had been gagged with a cloth. On January 10th, 1987, a third victim was found dead, Barbara Ware, age 23. She had been shot once in the chest, and her body was found under a gas tank with a pile of trash piled up on her in an alleyway. There were also tire tracks around her body, but something odd happened after this murder. This crime was reported by an anonymous 911 caller. A male seemed to have caught all that happened at the crime scene except for the killer's face.
Yes, I like to go to murder or dead body or something. Where at? The address is 1346 East 56th Street in the alley. You know, he threw her out. The only thing is hanging out of this, like he threw a gas tank on top of her, and the only thing you can see out is her feet.
Okay, what's your name?
Huh?
What's your name?
Oh, I don't think the nonsense. I know too many people. Okay, then, bye-bye.
Oh my gosh.
Yep.
He said, okay, bye-bye. I got to go. No.
So after, hearing the 911 call, police were kind of disturbed that this individual never saw the guy's face who threw the body in the alley. The van listed in the 911 call belonged to a local church. They had searched the vehicle and it wasn't a part of any crime. It yielded no results of even being a part of a crime. Cops believed that the caller was their suspect, but they weren't able to find him. Cops decided to keep these murders closed off from the public, so no one knew there was a serial killer living among them. After Barbara Ware's murder, this killer managed to murder 4 more victims. On April 15, 1987, Bonita Sparks, age 26, had just gotten a job as an elementary school monitor. She told her mother she was going to the store for cigarettes and she would return soon, but she never returned. She was found in a dumpster covered in garbage. She had been beaten, strangled, and shot in the chest. On November 1st, 1987, Mary Lowe, age 26, told her mother she was going to a party. Her body was found in an alley, and she had been shot once in the chest. On January 30th, 1988, Lucretia Jefferson, age 22, she had been found shot in the chest and left underneath a mattress in an alleyway. On September 11th, 1988, Alicia Monique Alexander, age 18, had asked her father if he needed anything from the store, and she promised her dad she would be right back. In my research, her father, Porter Alexander, and her brother, Donnell Alexander, recalled her disappearance and memories of her childhood, but they stated when she didn't return, they knew something had happened. Alicia Alexander was found 4 days later in an alley. She had been sexually assaulted and shot in the chest.
This is so freaking sad. Oh my goodness.
Yes. By now, police were suspecting the killer had to be an African-American male, but this would not fit the profile of a usual serial killer, who were usually young and white males. This is when they knew it would be hard to find him because he could easily hide within the community. He probably lived and worked where he killed his victims. All of the 7 women murdered had something in common. They were all shot by a .25 caliber automatic, sexually assaulted, and killed by the same man. But who was the killer was the question. Things would soon take a turn that no one could see coming. On November 19, 1988, Anitra Washington was shot and left for dead. She had gotten off work and was headed to a friend's house, and they were going to go to a party when she had encountered a man in an orange Ford Pinto. The man pulled over and asked her, could he take her where she was going? She was polite and replied no, and tried to ignore his eagerness. That's when he said, that's what's wrong with you Black women.
Now see.
Ooh.
He had other issues.
She eventually gives in, and while in the car, she starts to make small talk because she felt a little uncomfortable. Noticing he isn't driving in the direction she told him, she tells him he's going the wrong way. He explains to her he has to make a stop. He pulls up to a house claiming to be his uncle's on 81st Street. She also states his attitude instantly changed. He began calling her another woman's name, and she began to fear for her life and tries to escape the car, but he shoots her in the chest. As she grabs for the door, he said, if you open that door, bitch, I'll shoot you again. She was shocked and said, you shot me? She pleaded for him to take her to the hospital. He told her, I can't do that. As she was going in and out of consciousness, Anitra remembers seeing flashes of light. As she was focusing in and out, she said the flashes was coming from a camera. He was taking pictures of her. And as she passes out again and comes to, he is now on top of her. That night, this man not only kidnapped her, but he raped her and threw her out of the car, dumping her like trash, as he's done the others. He then speeds off, thinking he left her for dead. Anitra manages to get up after being shot in the chest and bleeding. She was able to make it to her friend's house. The next thing she remembers is waking up in a hospital. She could have died, but it was her rib cage that doctors said saved her life from the bullet hitting her heart. While in the hospital, Washington gave the police a complete description of both the man that did this to her and his car. He was a black male in his 30s, well-dressed, and the car he drove was an orange Ford Pinto with white racer stripes on it. They immediately make 3 different sketches of what this suspect could have possibly looked like at the time, but they dropped the ball and failed on alerting the community of a possible serial killer that could have saved everyone and prevented more killing.
Oh my goodness. I actually remember hearing about this case, and it was this one that you just talked about that made me remember that I've
Okay.
actually heard. This is crazy. So
Yes,
sad. So,
it
so sad.
is. So shortly after, Anitra Washington was attacked on February 23rd, 1989. An LA County sheriff named Rick Ross was caught in his car with a prostitute. The woman in the car tells police that she had been smoking crack with the sheriff and that he has a gun in his car and she was afraid of him. They arrest Ross because of the gun. While searching his home, they find a 25 caliber holster, but no gun. The gun found on him at the time matched that for 3 murders. He goes to trial because they believe they have their serial killer on hand. During his trial, 2 specialists are called to the stand. They share their testimony and conclude the gun found was not a match for the murders. Sheriff Rick Ross was then released and the cases were closed for all the murders he was charged for. But the weird thing was that the serial killing had also stopped abruptly in 1989, thus causing all the previous cases to be closed and labeled as a cold case. So the serial killer had stopped making killings also once that sheriff was arrested.
And this is still focused on the LAPD, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have a history of just
Yeah.
Dropping the
terrible.
ball.
Yeah, just
Exactly.
terrible. Wow.
Yes. But 14 years later, a hint at why they call him the Grim Sleeper, because of him taking a long break between the murders. On March 19, 2002, Princess Berthamew, age 15, a runaway who was placed into foster care at the age of 3, but when her foster mother died of heart failure and under no adult supervision, allegedly she was on the streets and fell into the hands of a pimp. And that is how she encountered her killer. She was found strangled, beaten, and raped. The DNA collected on her body matched that of the DNA collected of other past victims, indicating that the serial killer was back active. On July 11, 2003, Valerie McCorvey, age 35, was found strangled by her own necklace with a shirt stuffed in her mouth. She had been sexually assaulted. Police initially thought her boyfriend killed her, but the DNA found on her body matched that of the previous victims found. A killer was still on the loose and gaining momentum again. On January 1st, 2007, Janicia Peters, age 25, body was found in a dumpster by a homeless man. She had been shot in the back and tied in a plastic bag and died from suffocation. On the scene, police found a zip tie. Detectives ran it for DNA that was in the felony database and found that the saliva on it matched the DNA of the previous women. Now the hunt was back on, but the suspect was not listed in the databank to be found as a match. That's when detectives hurriedly tried to find a DNA match to get this killer off the streets that has terrorized the community for 24 years. There was even a $500,000 reward offered for the Grim Sleeper. This story even became a big national media sensation. This killer needed to be found before more lives was taken. In June of 2010, Detectives would finally get a big break they needed to help find the grim sleeper. In 2008, Christopher Franklin, at the age of 28, was convicted of a firearms felony charge. And before he could be released, Christopher, just like all the other felons, had to be registered with a DNA swab test. The databanks ran Christopher's DNA and found the match they had been waiting on for years. The DNA collected from Christopher Franklin matched that of Lonnie David Franklin Jr. through what is called familial DNA. This is where the DNA is used to match immediate family members, for example, from father to son to grandson, which will yield a positive match. They also noticed that the address used for Christopher was the same address for Lonnie Franklin Jr. They knew Christopher was too young to have committed any of the murders previously, which meant his father, Lonnie, was the only possible suspect. Y'all, that DNA.
That ain't no joke.
Okay. Woo. That technology, boy, is getting better. So during an interview I saw with Christopher Franklin, he stated he knew his dad was a perv and an asshole. But now reflecting, he can tell a lot of things weren't right. He also said at first he felt guilty his dad was found, but who would want someone like that on the street? He recalled memories of him and his dad pushing stolen vehicles down the streets. He remembered being with his dad and it wasn't fun, and his father would always give the kids beatings. Also stating it was hard to hear what his dad had done to so many women, and it's still hard to tell people that he meets that his dad is a serial killer. On July 5th, 2010, detectives began following Lonnie to try to collect DNA to make sure this was a definite match. During the surveillance, Lonnie was out to eat with a female friend at a pizza party. A detective acted as a busboy and collected items of a sliced pizza, a cup, and a napkin. But it was the napkin that had much of Lonnie's DNA, and the sample collected proved to be a perfect match. While outside watering his lawn on July 7, 2010, Lonnie Franklin Jr., who was now 57 years old, was arrested. According to his close friend, Ray, from the documentary I watched called Tales of a Grim Sleeper, he said Lonnie's house was surrounded by cops, helicopters, vans everywhere, and no one was allowed to leave their homes or be on the streets. Lonnie had never questioned anything regarding his arrest. During his interrogation interview, he kept saying he didn't know any of the women. He don't know how they got DNA on him. That came from him. He was just straight denial. Y'all, this man kept a straight face the whole interrogation and denied knowing any of the women.
Because that's when you're crazy. Sociopath.
I mean, it was
just
sickening.
do that. Ugh.
So Franklin never confessed to doing anything and maintained he was innocent. While police were searching through his home, they found over 800 pieces of evidence. There were 2 caliber guns found in the home and one which was used in Janicia Peters' murder. Also, a photo of Anitra Washington. Y'all remember she said she recalled the flashing camera?
Oh my goodness, yes.
Yeah.
So that was like a trophy thing for him, it sounds like.
Yes. That statement that the police took from her came out to be true. There were also 180 photos police later listed online to be identified by family. Y'all, 180 photos this man took of women.
That is terrible.
Ooh. And just kept them, huh?
Yes. Some of the other photos were not posted because they were so graphic. Some of the women in the pictures appeared to be unconscious or deceased. In their findings were stacks of money, jewelry, lingerie, homemade porn, and over 1,000 photos of women, not only of his victims, but of everyone that this man had encountered. Detectives found over 25 years worth of evidence in Mr. Franklin's home. So fast forward, there were several delays in Lonnie Franklin's trial because of a very lengthy pretrial of gathering all the evidence and collecting, anyone who wanted to come forward as a witness. So Lonnie Franklin Jr. was charged with 10 murders and 1 attempted murder for the 10 women he murdered and the attempted murder of Anitra Washington. The trial for Franklin began on February 16, 2016, and ended on May 2nd, 2016. The jury began deliberating on May 4th, 2016, and ended on May 5th, 2016. So after 3 months of a trial hearing and a day and a half of jury deliberation, Lonnie David Franklin Jr. was convicted on all counts. At his sentencing on May 12, 2016, prosecutors presented evidence of 4 more victims they believe were killed by Franklin. All of these came up like after his arrest. There were 3 identified as likely his victims. Their names are Sharon Dismuke, Inez Warren, Georgia Mae Thompson, dating all the way back to 1976. The 4th was identified through evidence of his garage after his arrest. Her body was never found. He wasn't charged for these 4 murders for the fear of delaying the trial any longer. On June 6, 2016, Los Angeles County jury sentenced Lonnie Franklin to death. And on June 10, 2016, the Superior Court sentenced Franklin on 10 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder while naming each victim. It is also noted he tried multiple times to get his conviction appealed. He was still trying to claim he was innocent and he didn't know of any of the victims that he was charged for. But on March 28, 2020, one of California's infamous serial killers, Lonnie David Franklin Jr., also known as the Grim Sleeper, died of natural causes while on death row
The
at
hell?
San Quentin State Prison.
The hell?
So terrible. Yeah.
So he gets to
crazy.
die on his own. Get out of
Yep.
here. Ooh. Should have stopped
But
it just before they knew it was coming
exactly.
and sent him to the chair.
But as of 2021, his cause of death and the result from the autopsy have not been released to the public. So let me add this little bonus in. The young woman that he raped in Germany flew into the States to testify against him also in his trial. And they used that also.
I know that's right.
And Anitra Washington, the one that he left for dead, she also testified against him as well as some of the family members of the deceased women. Yeah. And one of the
mad that he was able to go out like that.
You
know.
Yep. And no one suspected he was a serial killer because he didn't fit the profile. He wasn't a young white male and his victims weren't white women. He was a sanitation worker where he knew where to dump bodies and he killed at night when no one would least expect. His victims.
That's unfortunate though. It's unfortunate that it's like, yes, because of the victims that he had too, that he didn't get caught sooner, because they weren't like young white women.
Yep. And check this out. His victims were found with cocaine in their systems, and most of them were prostitutes. And that led to police overlooking them. And they were labeled, check this out, y'all. They were labeled NHI, which means no human involved, to describe the prostitutes and drug addicts during that time, and which many feel is still used today.
That is so terrible and tragic. Oh my goodness.
So the LAPD was accused of not caring to solve the cases because the women were Black and prostitutes, but stated that they just didn't have enough evidence during the time. And that's why detectives had created the Southside Slayer Task Force and stated they were focused on the murders, but had other factors affecting the attention needed to solve the murders. For example, the cocaine epidemic and the streets being ran over by gangs. This concludes, y'all, the Lonnie David Franklin true crime. And I want to give love to the families because they are still living. They did do an interview and a couple of documentaries.
Oh, really?
So if they hear this, my heart goes out to you.
I need to go.
Yeah, I saw one of the documentaries, and that's when I realized, oh wait, I have heard about this. Because one thing I thought about, and I still feel like this in my heart, he probably did kill in between that time that they say he didn't, but he just knew, like you said, how to get rid of bodies, and he targeted women who were
vulnerable, kind of like
and out on the streets and things like that. And sometimes when people are on the streets, it's like your family sometimes will give up on searching for you, so if they weren't reported missing or if no one, put any reports out there that someone is looking for them, then I feel like he probably did murder in between that little break that he took.
That 14-year break.
That's what I can't imagine that he just didn't do anything the whole 14 years.
Especially when he's taking pictures and needing stuff to remember it.
Thousands of pictures or photos of women. And they were like in nude photos. So it was like stuff they couldn't disclose to the public because they were so graphic. But that NHI, y'all, I had never heard that
I hadn't either.
before. No
I
human
don't even remember
involved.
that. Yeah, that's
That is
sad.
that is sad. And they were saying they still think they use it today. Like the people on the streets around Los Angeles were like, I think they still use it today because we still got women missing and nobody's looking for them. But that was the case of Lonnie Franklin Jr.
I'm still mad about how he passed away.
Right.
Like he got to go for natural causes.
And they won't disclose to the public. I think you need to let the public know. We got to know about his murders. I don't know. That's just how I feel. Disclose everything. What's so private? Why be private then? I guess we can close the book on Lonnie Franklin. Just do research, guys. That was a deep story. I wanted to give respect to the women. And that's why I presented it that way. All right, sippers, we're going to move into a segment called Take Another Sip. Take Another Sip is where we discuss something that really caught us off guard, surprised us. Maybe it made us mad. Maybe it made us laugh. But either way, it made us want to do what, ladies?
Take another sip.
Take another sip.
Okay, ladies, I have a question for you. How much are you invested with spending your time on social media?
I don't want to admit my answer to this question.
Okay, well, don't admit it, but
I don't know.
But let me just say it might end up being too much time.
Okay, so are you invested in such apps like Facebook, TikTok, Snapchat, and etc.? Do you follow any of the apps to learn the new dances, new songs, recipes, or the latest
fashions? I learned all my material.
Or like hair tutorials?
From the school of YouTube.
Okay.
Yeah, YouTube is like college for me. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Well, check this out. Well, recently I read an article from both Reuters.com and the New York Times that involves an app called TikTok. I don't know if everybody's familiar with TikTok, so I'm just going to say TikTok. So,
I am.
Okay. So the article on Reuters that was posted on November 8, 2021, so that's kind of recent, stated that a 16-year-old girl was rescued in Kentucky after using a hand gesture she learned on the social media app TikTok to signal to the motorist she was in trouble. So according to the Laurel County Sheriff's Office, the signal is hold your hand face palming outwards, tuck in your thumb, closing your fingers around it. So you're going to open up your hand, put your thumb inward, and put all 4 fingers over it.
How about I just did that while you were saying it?
Okay.
The way she was explaining it sounded like a tutorial. I was doing it too.
Right.
Yes. This has been demonstrated by users and nonprofit organizations on TikTok as a way for a person being abused to tell someone they are in trouble without alerting the abuser. So according to the article, the girl was in the front passenger seat, and made the signals from inside the car. A spokesperson for the Laurel County Sheriff's Office said a driver recognized the sign and called 911, which dispatched law enforcement officers to intercept the vehicle. That hand gesture was everything had it not been transmitted by the young lady. The person who spotted the signal called 911 and conveyed a suspicion that the girl was in trouble because she was using the hand gesture. Though the dispatchers and officers were unfamiliar with the signal, sheriff deputies pulled the car over to investigate and learned that the girl's parents had reported her missing 2 days earlier.
They say don't trust what you see on TikTok. I'm sorry to interrupt, sis, but when they said the police had never heard of it,
or the dispatchers.
TikTok ain't so bad after all, right?
Okay. So sheriff deputies arrested the driver, James Herbert Brick, age 61, of Cherokee, North Carolina, and charged him with unlawful imprisonment. Mr. Brick, who the sheriff's office said had pornographic images of a child on his phone, also faces child pornography charge. The girl and Mr. Brick are acquaintances, but not related, said Gabriel Cardo, the public affairs officer for the Laurel County Sheriff's Office. The girl told investigators that she had traveled with Mr. Brick through North Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, and Ohio, where he had family. He left the family after they learned that the girl was a minor and that she had been reported missing by her family. She said she began trying to get motorists' attention as they traveled from Ohio all the way to where they were in Kentucky. The girl was taken to a hospital and then reunited with her family who live in Asheville, North Carolina. This man kidnapped her, y'all, and took her through all those states.
Dang.
Kentucky, Ohio, Tennessee.
Thank
Like,
goodness
what is
she was
wrong with
found.
you?
Wow.
Yes. So TikTok, from my personal experience and searches, they give you a big variety of things to look at. But that right there, I think, is a good way, a positive way that it's being used.
There is a lot of trash out there, but I mean, that's a good story that came.
Yeah, that was a good story.
Yeah, I agree.
So sippers, share that information. If you know anybody that's, in distress, pay attention. Somebody's trying to get your attention with that hand signal. I had never heard of that hand gesture signal. That was to signify you're in trouble or right there with your abuser, so they wouldn't know. But in that article also, I left that out. The guy initially thought that she was just waving at motorists, but she was actually letting them know, like, hey, I need help. All right, sippers, we're going to move into what we call our random rundown, where we select random things such as current events or things that spark our interest to have an open discussion and give our opinions. So, ladies, I got one more. We're going to stick to this social media thing, okay?
Okay.
So, I recently found out that Snapchat is where it is to socialize with strangers. Y'all got Snapchat?
I got it. Don't use it, though.
I don't have Snapchat. So Snapchat, you get to converse with strangers and give a play-by-play of your life, just to gain a large following. So I found this little brief story in which it proves that even criminals like to post their whereabouts. Okay. So this came from unbelievablefacts.com, if anybody want to look. An article I found online from unbelievablefacts.com says, if you think criminals prefer Facebook, you are sadly mistaken. A burglar from Maine named Christopher Wallace is a big fan of Snapchat. So big that he decided to reveal his hiding spot there. After he stole a propane cook stove,
oh my gosh,
and a cast iron wood stove from a camp in Pierce Pond Township, Wallace posted on Snapchat that he was back at his home in Fairfield. After tipsters relayed the info to police, authorities showed up for the fugitive. I mean, like, why do people
why do so many people post
they're everywhere about how I'm here?
Like, I don't get it.
I don't either. But I guess the FBI and police are following all these apps and they found out where he was.
People just make it so easy.
Yes.
It's like you post your whereabouts, you tag where you're at, you post your gun, if you holding the gun of the money that you stole or something.
Yes.
Just dummies.
Just dummies. But I guess, I wanted to show that social media has a good side to it, and it also has some dumb sides to it. Because criminals are out there showing the dumbness, but at least they're being arrested. You shouldn't have posted where you were, sir. So that will conclude this week's episode.
Is it time?
No, it's not that time already, is it?
It's time to say goodbye.
Oh,
yes, I enjoyed it, ladies.
Same here.
Yes.
This
well,
was a good one.
Everybody look into this week's, true crime, and be careful about your social media apps.
Please don't post your crimes.
Yes. Exactly.
Because you're gonna get, we're just gonna talk about you. It don't matter. We're gonna put you on here, and I'm gonna discuss where you were.
We are. And you're gonna be one of our episodes.
Yeah,
exactly. I've been reduced to just simply posting memes and inspirational quotes.
Okay.
Like, all this extra stuff is just taking the fun out of it for me to post like real life anything. So
yeah, because you just never know who is actually waiting for you to post to find out where you are. And people are so clever; they can check out your background. I know where that background is. It's like, dude, I wasn't even there. Yes, you were.
Super sleuths to be online for real. Exactly. Well, sippers, we're back, and continue to hang in there with us because season 2, we're ready for you.
Yep.
Our return, we're here. With that being said, bye.
Bye, ladies. Bye, sippers.
See you next
Bye.
episode.
Bye, ladies.